We're now approaching the 1 year mark of the global pandemic and the way that our lives have been changed dramatically. So much so that it's affected our marriages with us being at home for a long duration of time. Today, we're going to look at some of those challenges and find ways to love our wives through them. Stay tuned. Welcome to the Husband's Coach's Corner, the podcast that teaches husbands how to love their wife every day and become better men in the process. I'm your host, Chris Scott, aka The Husband Coach. Welcome back to the podcast designed for husbands to learn how to love their wives each and every day, and because of it, they're becoming better men in the process. If you haven't already, consider signing up for our weekly newsletter where you gain access to the drills for each one of the episodes that are produced here on the podcast. And if you're on a platform that supports some sort of interaction, be it liking, commenting, subscribing, reviewing, rating, whatever it may look like, please, I would ask that you do that because it does help get the message spread across that platform and triggers those algorithms to share this information with more people based off of the rating and reviews that you provide to it. So if you got time, I would really appreciate it if you just shared a quick comment or like or subscribe. Now, one of the things with the following issues that I'm going to present here today, one, this is not all inclusive, and these are some of the main ones that have led to divorce, like proven led to divorce. Many articles that I read over the past, 6-7 months, because I started this podcast back in June of 2020. We were already in the pandemic with some stay-at-home orders in place across the globe, and I started to pay attention to what's happening inside the home with marriages. So today, the items that I bring up are not all inclusive, and you may be struggling with a particular issue. If you are willing, I'd ask that you leave it in a comment. If you're watching this video on YouTube, leave it in the comment section. And if you want to talk about something very specific and you just want to get a third person's point of view from it, you can send me an email at husbandcoach2020@gmail.com. That'll be in the description and the show notes, so you can always get a hold of me. I do check that email at least twice a day, and I'm really here to help you if you're going through that challenge. All right. Now, if you find yourself in a situation where you just believe divorce is the only option, I highly recommend you find a professional third-party counselor that can walk you and your wife through what it means to rebuild and regain confidence and trust, and maybe even just build your overall communication skills in your marriage. Now, let's go ahead and dive into today's episode. So the first thing that, this is a very overarching topic, is external stress can and will amplify existing issues. Now, I don't think anyone will argue that external stress can and will amplify any issues that are already existing, right? It's like the compounding effect. If I already have problems and then more problems come up, then I have double the problems, or sometimes even quadruple the problems. This is just a part of life, and external stresses are going to pop up. What we've seen specifically with the pandemic is a few things. Obviously, death of a family member. That is an external stress. And let me back up for a second. An external stress is something that is caused outside of your relationship that has some sort of impact either on one member in the relationship or both. And in the terms of a death of a family member, especially if it was due to coronavirus, one, I'm sorry for your loss, and I understand the challenge of that. I lost my father during this pandemic. It was not due to coronavirus, but I understand. And that is an external stress. It's something that comes from outside of the marriage and can cause either you or your wife to have some sort of negative response to the things that you do because they're still dealing with the grieving process of loss. All right. That's obviously a big one. Another big one is the loss of a job. There are a lot of people here in the United States and across the globe that they don't have work anymore. And that is a direct stress to the family, especially if you are a solo income family and you have all your, essentially every sort or every dollar that comes into the house is coming directly from your job and you no longer have it. That is a stress. It's an external stress that, can be directly tied to the pandemic itself and the response that most of these companies have. If you're a small business owner, there are a lot of reasons that the loss of job can absolutely lead to stress internal to the marriage. Another one, and this is a little less, a little less likely because of the stay-at-home order, but a car accident. When you do have a job and you get into an accident and now you no longer have a way of getting to your job easily and you have to start, finagling or putting things together so you can get to work, that's another external stress that can play in to the marriage, especially if you go from having two cars to maybe having one car. And how do you share that one car? My wife and I recently went down to one car, and we're blessed that I can walk to work from where we live. So, for me, it's a health benefit, and for my wife, it's a sense of security that she has the vehicle while I'm at work if she needs to go and do whatever she needs to go and do. And then, of course, there's always this external stress, and I think this happens outside of the pandemic, which car accidents obviously happen and death of a family member, loss of job, but identity theft. So there has been a lot of identity theft since the pandemic has started. And this is causing a stress on the finances. Now, the last three things that I mentioned, they are stressors on the finances. And the reason why I bring these ones up as the top stressors or external stressors is because finance itself can be an existing issue in your marriage. And that is one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this one up, or these few up. Now, how do we overcome these things and in the midst of these external stressors find a way to not only work through the existing problems that we have in our marriage, but also find a way to love our wife through these challenges? Always look at this as an opportunity. All right. Challenges are just that. But if you defeat yourself and say, oh man, this really sucks, then you are already telling yourself that this is going to be something that you're not going to enjoy. And I'm not saying that every challenge is enjoyable, because you and I both know that every challenge is not enjoyable. However, see this as an opportunity to grow in love with your wife by overcoming these external stresses together. So you're going to have to recruit your wife and work together as a team. This is going to build so much unity in your marriage in a way that, if there weren't external stressors where it's something you two can band together to overcome, maybe you wouldn't have made it through. So my recommendation here is recruit your wife and have a genuine conversation and build out a plan. If you got last week's drill, you got the problem solving steps. That's all this is. But you're intentionally sharing those problem solving steps with your wife. All right. Now, this is how you can overcome all of these with the exception of death of a family member. There is an emotional grieving process that goes along with that. In these types of situations, what you really want to do is try not to fix anything that's going on, especially if this is a loss of a family member that your wife is experiencing. Try not to fix the situation. resist all the temptations to just jump in and say, okay, let's do this and let's do that. Instead, just be there to comfort her, to console her, and to listen to whatever is going on, if she's willing to share and talk about it. That's all you have to do in these situations. And sometimes that's tough. For me personally, I don't like tears. I don't like crying. I don't like to be around people that are crying. When my father passed away, I realized that I had to step up and be a comforter to those around me who were hurting. And that's not to say that I wasn't hurting, because I still hurt. I miss my father every day. For those of you who have been following the podcast, my father is my mentor and has been for years. So I lost a huge portion of my emotional support in my marriage and just in my personal life. So at the moment that my family was grieving, I had to go in and say, okay, I got you guys. And you're going to need to be there for your wife in that circumstance as well. And only when she confirms that she's ready for you to help her fix the situation, you should fix the situation. If she never confirms that, then don't worry about it. All right? Just be there to listen and to love her. Now, moving into the next situation that I observed. Intentional quality time is still important. There are so many articles that I read where people were saying, I've been at home with my wife, or the wife is saying, I've been at home with my husband, and it just feels like we're always around each other, so I need to be separated, and I need my space, and, all these things. 100% relevant. But when I say intentional quality time, all of those individuals were talking about time spent. That doesn't mean that it's quality. That just means that you are in the same house, and, depending on your living conditions, you may not have an office. So you may be sitting at the kitchen table while your wife is sitting in the living room or at the dining room table, whatever. And you guys are stepping on each other's toes where she's used to not having you there, or maybe both of you are used to being out at work throughout the day, and then you come home together. There's kids involved. I get it. Quality time is still important though. All right. So here's some thoughts on quality time. One, it's key to building a relationship. I talk about this all the time in almost any opportunity I have to talk about quality time. It is a love language, if you are familiar with the 5 love languages. And if this is your wife's primary love language, what I would recommend is, one, ask her to retake the love language quiz, just to make sure that quality time is still one of her top love languages. Because those do change, and the global pandemic could absolutely have changed the way that she feels love. And you should be aware of that. That's actually a bonus tip. It wasn't in the notes, just thought about that right now, but wanted to share that with you guys. When you are building your relationship by spending quality time, this is something that will, one, go way beyond the pandemic, right? Everything I talk about is going to help you in the pandemic, but the goal is to help you beyond the pandemic, all right? The next thing, or my next thought on intentional quality time, try to coordinate your lunches if both of you work, or regardless, whenever you can take a break and have lunch, whatever time that is, try and coordinate that with your wife so you can have lunch together. And, just embrace each other in being together. I've talked about this in the past. Don't focus on talking about how's your day at work. That's such a very cliche way of communicating, and it's dry. And a lot of times, unless your wife is extremely passionate or you're extremely passionate about the work you do, you're not even really going to want to talk about it all that detail. And maybe you end up ranting about some stuff that you don't like about work. And that's not a very constructive way of spending time with your wife. Instead, talk about things that you want to do over the weekend. Things that you want to do together, places you want to go, people you want to see. Maybe even just plan out your next date together. These are things that bring you closer together, and that is quality time because both of you are working on, okay, yeah, this Saturday, let's have a stay at home dinner and a movie, or let's have a stay at home date night where we dance all night long for 4 hours straight up, from 10 until midnight. I guess that's only 2 hours. So from 8 until midnight, whatever it may be, just plan it together, and you could do that over your lunch break. And if you do that, intentionally planning your lunches every single day through that week, by the time you get to that date night, the passion that you will have built because you both worked to build this date night together, that's quality time. You spend it throughout the day, or I'm sorry, throughout the week, and now you're at the catalyst of what you planned. So try and coordinate your lunches together. That's a really good way of meeting your wife where she is. Now, I kind of already jumped into my last thought on quality time, which is still plan date nights with your wife. I get it. Some things have loosened on restrictions at the time of the recording of this, but let's just assume that restrictions have not been lifted and we are still being told that we have to stay in our homes and, or at least in the immediate area of our home. Maybe you can have a date night where you walk around the block, and I guess maybe not a date night. It does not have to be night, right? I don't recommend taking walks at night. I recommend that you go on a walk through the day, and maybe on that walk, you guys talk about or reminisce on the things that you used to do earlier on in your marriage, how you met. One of the funnest stories that I get to tell my children is how my wife and I met. And I really enjoy when my wife is there because we remember how we met. The big pieces are very similar. But the small details, the way that I've seen it through my perspective, it's just a fun story to tell our kids, and our kids love hearing it because it's just funny, and my wife loves to hear it. It always brings a sense of joy in our home when we tell the story of how we met. So, just reminisce on things that you guys used to do and plan again for the things that you want to do in the future. This is how you can bring the past to the present and you guys come together of what you want to do for the future. So hopefully that made sense. Intentional quality time. The next one is division of work in the house. You got to share it. All right. So let me be as clear as I can on this. There are things that need to happen inside of the home that traditionally you used to do, or maybe your wife used to do. And now that you're both at home, you get a little bit more complacent and those things don't happen as often because you're so focused on doing other things that your whole life has changed. Get back into the routine of doing the things that you were already responsible for if you lapsed in doing those things. Now, where you see your wife challenged and struggling on the things that she is responsible for in the house, or that she used to be responsible for in the house, then spend time taking care of those things with her or for her. This is a prime way of providing acts of service, which again is another love language. All right. I don't know how else to break that down other than find ways that you can show your wife that you see she's struggling with something and say, you know what? I love you. I'm going to help you through this. It is a huge burden off her shoulders when she sees that we can identify with the challenges she's going through and we love her enough to step out of our comfort zone or out of our routine to take care of those things. All right. Now, obviously, I've said this in the past. You got to know what you're doing. If you don't know how to use the washer or the dishwasher or whatever, then ask her, how do I do this? So that way you can do it and then not like upset her that you're doing it the wrong way. All right. And here's the last thing that I have. We as husbands, we gotta be peacemakers in the home. It is so important that we provide sound leadership and confidence in the home because it brings stability for our wives to trust in the things that we say and do. Now, when I say leadership, I'm not saying dictatorship, okay? What I mean is the first person that should come to the table and say, hey, let's work through our differences, let's work through our challenges, should be you. It should be us as the husband. We are the leaders in our home, and we bring our family through the tough circumstances. So we have to be a visionary, and we have to be able to show them that we can get through this, and we will get through this, and we'll end up on the other side of whatever this challenge is. If that is not something you are providing in your home, then it's going to be extremely hard to be a peacemaker, because there are people who call themselves peacemakers, but they're very passive in their approach, meaning they don't address circumstances or situations, and they don't have a real plan developed to get through whatever their situation is, and they're just hoping that it just goes away at some point. Now, that brings us back to our very first topic of existing issues are amplified when we are in home with our wives, and you may be the cause to some of these existing issues. So this is something that you have to look at and say, okay, am I a peacemaker or am I passive? Now, a peacemaker is someone who says, we're sitting down, we're going to figure this out, we're going to work together, we're going to get through this, and there is a better future for the two of us together. All right? That is the type of leadership that we have to provide in the home. And when we demonstrate that, our wives will truly say, okay, you know what? I need to step up and sit down. And it may not happen instantly. It does not always happen instantly because every situation has a different level of how you become or how you get through it, right? Every situation has a different level of how you get through it. So just keep that in mind. The other thing about being a peacemaker, use I statements over you statements. What that means is if there's a situation that arises in the house, say, I feel like, or I believe this is, those are I statements. Instead of you always do this, or you should be doing this, you shouldn't be. Like, don't start your statements that way, because that's an instant, like, point the finger at a person, and no one likes to have fingers pointed at them. So you are not being a peacemaker if you start with, you need to do better at this. I'm just saying, not a good way of starting your peacemaking ability. Now, the other thing about being a good peacemaker is you have to listen more than you speak. If you caught my last episode of one of the hardest things about being a husband, it is we overtalk. And this is very true. We overtalk. So just be quiet. Listen. Speak less. Speak direct. But listen to what it is that your wife is saying. And this is how you can truly make peace in your home, because you are gaining a deeper understanding to what is challenging to your wife. All right? And then the other way of being an awesome peacemaker, this goes back to knowing your wife's primary love languages, the first and second love languages. Give her those things, whatever they are, overwhelmingly throughout the time that you're in, no matter where you are, right? Again, I'm talking about even outside of the pandemic, we should be overwhelmingly loving our wives and knowing her primary love language and providing that to her on a consistent basis in an overwhelming way, you are instantly going to build peace in your home. Let's just wrap all of this up for today's episode. One, you got to be a peacemaker. All right. We just talked about that. You know all the notes on that. I'm not going to go through those again. Two, external stresses are not all bad. Some of the external stresses give you an opportunity to work through challenges with your wife in a way that you can build continuity, unity, trust, and confidence. All right. The next one is we got to capitalize on time that we have in the home to spend with our wives and make it as best quality as possible. As best quality as possible. All right. Not no little skimpy time where it's like, I'm going to give you 10 minutes of my time. No, make it the best 10 minutes that you can give to your wife, period. Okay? And then last, don't be afraid to share the division of work. If you see that something needs to get taken care of, or if you observe, like, what the wife journal has in there, observations of our wives. And if you don't have that, sign up for the list so you can get it. I know that's a shameless plug, but I guarantee you it is the number one tool that I use to observe and learn about my wife so I can find ways to love her every single day, which is the crux and the premise behind this entire podcast. Now, if you found value in this podcast episode today, again, please rate, comment, subscribe, like, do whatever interactive thing the platform that you are listening to this episode on allows for. And until the next time, I want you guys to find a way to love your wife every day. Peace.